be talking about reducing MIDI latency when you're recording with the Microfreak. I use Ableton, so this will be specific to Ableton. Yeah, let's get started. So I have my Microfreak on an audio track and channel 2. Let's see if we can hear it. Perfect. All right, so I'm actually going to remove that audio track because the first thing we're going to do is use an external instrument, which goes on a MIDI track in Ableton. Just put that in there because it does a lot of latency compensation behind the scenes, so you don't need to think about it too much. And it lets you specify where MIDI from this track will be sent to. So I'm going to send MIDI from this track to the Microfreak, and I want to get that audio back on channel 2, which we saw from the audio track I added and removed a minute ago. Okay, so I'm going to, just for a really simple example, just so we can see where some of the pitfalls are with latency, I'm gonna pick maybe C3 here, preview. All right, that sounds like it's working. Great. So I'm just going to put a few more down, and I'm going to shorten this clip and maybe loop it a little bit. Okay. So now we're just going to hear the C3 note on every downbeat. Okay. So now imagine you want to either bounce this to audio, or you just want to confirm that it's playing in time with the rest of your track. One way you can do this is to create a new audio track like we did before. Set it to channel 2, and then we'll just record what's happening. Okay, so let's zoom in on this. And if you look, we're way off. Like the MIDI note right here is right on the downbeat, but you can even see it here. We're just way off. Like if you hover over this and look on the bottom, you'll see a duration number, and it looks like 47 milliseconds of latency. That's real bad. That's not what you want when you are recording audio. So I did this on purpose to show you how easy it is to get trapped in latency issues, even when you're using external instrument. So let's try one easy thing to maybe make this better. If we turn monitoring here, which is in auto off, let's just actually turn it to off. So I'm going to, actually, you know what? I'm going to duplicate this. Okay, so I'm going to just duplicate this so we have a copy. And let's try recording again with monitoring off. Okay, now we have a different problem. It looks like the note or the audio is being recorded somehow before the MIDI notes. Yeah, MIDI notes perfect dead on. In the first example, we are late. In the second example, we're early, and that's not great for the first downbeat over here because we're missing part of the waveform. Not great. So this is another weird, confusing situation where what's happening is Ableton is trying to compensate for any sort of latency, which you can see in your Ableton settings right here, 512. Like this input latency and output latency, external instruments trying to compensate for that, and generally Ableton has all these ways of trying to make sure this is not noticeable when you record. But now it seems Ableton's trying too hard, and it's actually coming before the downbeat. Like it's shifting everything too far back. So now let's talk about what actually works. When you are recording, I would say this applies to any synthesizer, but I found it particularly frustrating with my Microfreak because it was my first ever hardware synth, and I suspect other people might be similarly frustrated trying to record their Microfreak into Ableton. So let's try this one more time. Now this time I'm gonna duplicate this again, and I'm gonna delete this. We're gonna keep monitoring off. In this audio track, instead of sampling in from the recording in from the my audio interface, we are going to just resample one of the external instrument, and that just records exactly as external instrument, which is designed to match up all this latency stuff so that everything's as on as possible. We're just going to resample that. So that's going to be our input to this audio track. I'm going to record it. Okay. So it looks like we're not perfect yet. 12 milliseconds. So that 12 milliseconds, one thing we can start tweaking is we can add 12 milliseconds of hardware latency here and see what happens. So let's duplicate. And that's built into external instrument to account for maybe the Microfreak is a bit slow in responding to MIDI and sending audio back out. So let's try one more time. I'm gonna record here, and here we go. Okay, and look at that. We are basically dead on, like maybe less than a millisecond off, which is not something we can hear. So there you go. Through a combination of knowing to resample external instrument with monitoring off, and then adding a little bit of hardware latency in the external instrument to compensate, for me it's almost always around 12 milliseconds for my Microfreak. That is how you can record from your Microfreak when you want to sequence from Ableton using external instrument. So let's get rid of these, and just to summarize, this right here, this audio track is what you want for latency-free recording with the Microfreak. You want monitoring off. You want to resample or record in from the external instrument track. And on external instrument, just tweak the hardware latency based on the first attempt using this approach. And from there, it should be basically dead on. Okay, thanks for watching.